Now I have taped the paper on all the four sides with a masking tape, and let's start by giving a light wash of water on the entire paper. While giving this wash, you can go with a cross wash, that is by going vertically once and then horizontally once, so that the water is there on every part of your paper. Now let's start taking our colors. So I'm taking a cobalt blue color and mixing some water with it. And I'm just dropping in my blue color now with some random shapes to make our sky. So as you can see, the color is not that much pigmented since I have added a lot of water to it, because I don't want my sky to be very dark since it is going to be a very backgrounded element and I don't want to enhance it a lot. So I'm not adding very much of color pigment onto this color, keeping it lighter. So don't overdo the sky or don't put too much of color onto your sky. Keep it limited. I'm just adding a little bit of darker blue shade onto my clouds when they are still wet to give a nice effect. But again, don't use a lot of color pigment. Keep it less pigmented and use more of water. Now I'm mixing some cobalt blue and emerald green to create a sea blue color and just giving it on the rightmost bottom corner of my paper to mark my sea. And now I'm using yellow ochre and some amount of burnt sienna to it, and I will be painting it on the leftmost corner of my paper to mark the sand. Don't go to mix the yellow and the blue shade, keep them as they are on the sides. So let's mix some burnt sienna with our green and give that olive greenish shade in the background to make a light mountain. So make it very light, keep the colors watery because we don't want it to be too vibrant. They are the elements which are there in the background and I don't want to highlight them. The main highlight will be our sand and sea. So we are keeping the background elements completely light. Let this layer completely dry up and after that make a sea blue shade and start going with horizontal strokes on your water. Now I'm just wetting my brush, dabbing the excess water off my tissue and spreading in the strokes. Now I'm taking some dark blue color. You can use any dark blue, which is a cerulean blue or a ultramarine blue or a Persian blue, and dropping in some shades onto the rightmost corner with the brush. This I am doing when my earlier color is still wet. Now let's take some yellow ochre color and start making some horizontal strokes on our sand as well. So while doing this, I'm not painting the entire sand. As you can see, I'm just making some rough random strokes. So this is not a plain wash. Now I'm taking some burnt sienna color and mixing a sap green color to it. And let's just highlight our mountain a bit more. So again going with very random strokes while doing this. And don't take too much of color pigment, keep the color pigment less and add some water to it since we don't want to make it too dark. Now I'm mixing some color to make a brown color shade. So I have taken some burnt sienna and I have added a very little amount of sap green to it. And I am giving the first layer for our rocks. So these are not very nicely shaped right now. So again I am taking some burnt sienna color and mixing a little amount of cerulean blue to it and dropping in it on my rock shape. Now I have waited for my layer to completely dry up and I am taking a small brush now and mixing some burnt umber and cerulean blue. So I have mixed the burnt umber and cerulean blue to get a very dark brown shade and I am going in with smaller strokes and just defining the shape of the rocks a bit more. So I am painting with this on the bottom parts and on the left hand side of the rocks since those are the areas which are going to be a bit darker. And on the right part of the rocks I'll be painting my yellow ochre shade later on. So now I'm taking my yellow ochre and painting it on the right parts of the rock and giving some strokes on the sand as well. So as you can see, these strokes are very rough and natural. I am not giving nice crisp lines while I am doing this. I want them to be a bit uneven and rough. So again going with the dark brown color and on the left side and on the right side painting it with my yellow ochre. Now I am just making some dark green color with my sap green plus burnt sienna. So this is a darker olive green shade which I have made. And now I am using my round brush to make some bushes in the background with this color. So again I am going with very random strokes, just tapping the brush on the paper with my color in random directions to get the bushes. Now I am just taking some dark blue color. You can take a cerulean blue or a ultramarine blue for this. And again going in with few strokes on my water onto the rightmost side. And again just cleaning off my brush with water and tapping off the excess water on my tissue and spreading it a bit more. So now for the waves, we will again need a opaque white color. I'll be using a fabric white color. You can even use a acrylic or a poster white for this. We are using a opaque white since it will be better to show the waves in this color to make it more prominent. So I have mixed a very little amount of water with this, and I am going in with a small brush and making some strokes. These strokes I am making at the junction of the water with the sand to mark the foam of my water. So wherever there are rocks in the water will be splashing on, and that's why I'm just making some curved lines and some dots to show the splash of water on the rocks. I'm just making some small strokes with my white color to mark the waves in the sea. This white I have only used in the front part. Afterwards, in the right part, I am using a watercolor white now. So the right part, I don't want the white to be too prominent. That's why I'm going with a watercolor white, since the watercolor white will be a little faded. Now I'm making some dark blue color with ultramarine blue and dark green and giving it below my waves to just mark some depth and shadows onto the water. So I'm going in with some strokes with my dark blue shade. So you can see this has started enhancing our sea more. Now I'm mixing some burnt sienna color and some blue color again to make a dark brown shade, and again just going in, giving in on my rocks on the leftmost part to give it more depth on my rocks. And you can see the rocks are now clearly enhanced more than they were before, since we have added nice depth onto it. So I am giving it on the left and the bottom parts of my rocks. So this is a very dark, deep, vibrant color which I am using. So this has a lot of color pigment to it now. And with that I did my rocks. And let's just do a little reflection of the rocks which are there in the water and also the trees. So for that I am going with the same rock and tree color shades with some horizontal strokes in the water. Not overdoing it, just a very little amount to make it natural. And just going with my yellow ochre on my sand with a few strokes here and there. Now let's mix some burnt sienna with sap green and make the frontmost element of our painting, which is the coconut tree. For that I have drawn a nice trunk for the tree. So while drawing the trunk, make sure you don't make it too fat. That is, don't make a thicker stroke, and make the trunk going thinner at the top, and it can be a bit more thicker at the base. Drawing two more in the background. So in the background they will be slightly lighter. I'm not making the color shade too dark for the background ones. So I'm using my sap green again and just drawing some leaves at the background trees. So while doing this, you don't need to worry much because they are going to be in the background. So I'm just drawing the central line and then marking the strokes of the leaves. So do this with a smaller sized brush. It will be easier for you. Again, I am mixing some sap green and some yellow ochre to it and going with the leaves. So I have started making the leaves for the front tree now. For that I am using a darker green color and just mixing a little amount of yellow ochre or a brown shade to it to make it a bit olive greenish shade. and start giving the strokes in the similar way. And let's just darken the front tree more with a bit more of a color pigment. So I'm just darkening the frontmost trees green by mixing a little of dark blue and brown onto my dark green. And just going over the same leaves again with that darker green shade. And now let's just add a few more leaves onto our trees to make it a bit more filled up. So with the same color, I'm just adding a few more leaves. And in the background with my dark green color, I'm just making some grass just below the line of the mountain. I am adding few strokes vertically to show some grass. Then we'll take some black color and draw a few birds flying in the sky. Make the birds very small in size since they are very far. And we are done with this painting also, and we'll just remove off the tapes from the edges. And this painting is also ready to beautify your shelf with the other watercolor paintings that you did.